Thank you, Chairman Smith, and also to the bipartisan panel here. I think this is not only a really good conversation, it's incredibly timely. Professor Kugas, you highlighted at the beginning that when the United States government fails to define this battle space, the Chinese will do it for us. And I think that is an absolutely truism. You need only look at what Ms. Xi has highlighted today as being so very true. I would offer the same is also true for our business and innovation sector. If we in the United States fail to define this battle space, the Chinese are going to do it for us. Mr. Cantor Freedom, more than a decade playing professional sports in the NBA. I mean, you are an individual who came from a community that had a totalitarian regime to the United States. You're now an amazing U.S. citizen. You're still an incredible basketball player. You came under this vacuum of leadership by corporate America to allow the Chinese to define what would be our principles in the United States simply because you wore a pair of shoes that said, I don't support the Chinese government's abuse of Tibet or its abuse of the Uyghurs. Who specifically did you feel the most pressure from? Was it someone in China or was it somebody happening right here in the United States?
So it was actually the Player Association, which I give thousands of dollars every month to protect my rights against the NBA, you know? And I was very confused. I'm like, why are they pressuring me? They should be on my side, not the NBA side.
Absolutely right.
And one of my teammates said, well, if there's no NBA, there's no Player Association. So they got to do whatever they can to put a pressure on you. Even one point, I was still talking to someone from the NBPA, the Player Association. They said, if you don't if you don't stop wearing those shoes, we are going to change the rules. So no one can put any kind of message on their shoes. And I was like, I cannot believe that they are telling me that they're going to change the whole rule in NBA so no one can, because it was so beautiful seeing all those players are writing these beautiful messages on their shoes about their kids, about if someone passed away, RIP to blah, blah, you know. It was a beautiful message. And then during the NBA bubble, NBA was telling us, you know, be outspoken about the social justice are happening in America. They put the BLM logos on the floor. They put the phrases behind our jersey, which was controlled by the NBA. We couldn't pick what we wanted to pick and stuff. So Adam Silver was the one telling all the players, hey, just go out there and speak, give interviews and stuff. And all of a sudden, when the topic was China, you know, they were just all silent and they were just going against what I was saying, which was non-political, you know. So it was someone from America, and I was like, how can the biggest dictatorship in the world, China, can control a 100% American-made company and fire a U.S. citizen? And I would just keep asking that question to myself. I was like, are we really free? Is it only NBA? The more I study, the more I realize NBA is not the only one. You see Hollywood, Wall Street, academias, big tech, you know, farmland. And I started to ask this question to myself. We just keep talking about the freedom we have in this country. Are we really free? So no, it was literally someone from the NBA who was American. So,
Mr. Cantor Freedom, you highlight the story of wearing free Tibet shoes. As an amazing NBA player, you were didn't play a single game when you wore those shoes. Yeah. And within 24 minutes of that game alone, the Chinese government said that they were going to pull all Boston Celtics games. And as a result, the NBA basically not only pressured you, but gave, one, the Boston Celtics a horrible loss. Two, deprived the people of China a great opportunity to see not only a great game, but really give an on-ramp for more Chinese to see what is true and great about America, our freedom of speech. But three, perhaps worst of all, we saw an American institution who wraps itself in the flag and is proud to stand on every social issue for the voice of, as you highlighted, our First Amendment freedom of speech rights, but then muzzles our own American population because of a hopeful pot of money coming out of China to keep them going. This is frustrating not only on multiple levels, and Mr. Fish has highlighted this. This is the soft power that China controls all over the world. But to have it come home to roost here in the United States puts us in a highly detrimental place, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate that this commission is really looking at what the Chinese have done to subvert our own basic freedoms in the U.S., as they've done in Ms. Xi's case back home. I want to speak very specifically now on a couple of issues that are of acute interest. Professor, I'm an information operations warfare officer with the U.S. Air Force. One of the things that we have looked at specifically is this relationship that China has tried to manipulate the battle space, specifically in the digital sector. Can you please speak about some of these emerging technologies, specifically artificial intelligence, blockchain with China's blockchain-based service network, their consumer-facing applications, as you highlighted, TikTok here domestically, but WeChat domestically in China, and the contribution of the Chinese Communist Party's global surveillance state for data collection and how it's manipulating? It's a lot.
Oh, no. But I love it. It's a great question. I won't be able to answer it all today right here, but I'll do my best. So I like to think about this in 3 different levels. So on one hand, the risk that kind of comes up most commonly is the risk to individuals. So like what's happening when I'm being surveilled? I would argue that this is actually kind of the smaller level. We can kind of even put that aside because most people are not that interesting. Maybe members of this committee, but most people are not. Then there's this level of economic competitiveness. So it's the fact that there's this asymmetrical trade in data between the U.S. and China. So companies like ByteDance and the companies like TikTok can operate in the U.S., but equivalent firms cannot operate in China. So there's data that companies in the U.S. are able to gather, and then as a result, Chinese firms are able to outcompete U.S. firms in the U.S. So this is an economic competitiveness risk, which then feeds into also this. When we talk about the communication space, the movement out of kind of a creation of controlled communication environments where we don't actually know precisely what the terms of service mean, what the long-term implications are, and there aren't really mechanisms in the U.S. to prevent private companies from executing on their own terms of service. Right. So in the event that this changes our communication environment, there's very little that we can do. Now, in the context of something like WeChat, people who start WeChat accounts in China and then continue using them in the US, there was a Citizen Lab report that noted that Chinese registered accounts, and even those that switch to international numbers, can still be subject to Chinese terms of service. So we are already seeing this kind of expansive censorship and expansive use of Chinese government extraterritorial oversight in a US context. Now, when we think about the long-term issues of things like generative AI, this asymmetrical trade becomes particularly important because these firms, as a result of civil-military fusion, are pressured by the Chinese government and can be pressured by the PLA to share their insights, to be able to develop new tools in a wide range of different areas, from health to communication to financial services. And these not only outcompete, but they also have dual uses. So one area that I thought was very interesting that I couldn't do a lot of research on because of my lack of clearance was the precision medicine industry and the investment of Chinese firms in the precision medicine industry in the US, and the development not just of new precision medicine tools, but of potentially bioweapons in the long term. So that's something that I would, in your context, perhaps look at in greater depth.
Both enlightening and frightening at the same time.
Thank you.
The other area that you highlighted here is the unseen, or the uneven, I will say, enforcement by the CCP. Here in the United States, at least you have the ability to go in front of a court and have your day. For a recent series of raids done by the Chinese Communist Party on U.S. financial sectors, I'm talking here Bain, Mintz Capital, these growing hostilities, some American companies doing business in China are recognizing that their future there is short-term if they don't completely abdicate to Chinese rules of enforcement. Talk to us about how that is not only a bludgeon to basically force U.S. companies to give up their American principles, but it's also becoming a very dangerous tool that those who are doing business within China are going to be sacrificing, their long-term capital, no longer being U.S. institutions, but really Chinese institutions that happen to operate in the United States.
So this is a really important point. And again, I'm happy to discuss in greater depth, but I think that we need to think about this on a couple of different levels. First of all, it's the role that individuals play. So individuals now post-COVID face significant checks on their ability to move. So COVID checks require you to share your passport number or your residence permit, your Chinese bank account number. So to be able to do anything, like be able to go into a cab or rent a scooter or purchase something, you have to be able to follow these checks and be able to submit yourself to this type of surveillance. So people who are working for those companies, both foreigners and Chinese people, in order to continue to exist within a Chinese context, have to follow the essentially most conservative versions of these rules in order to continue to operate. Now, one of the things in talking with people from the American Chamber of Commerce that's been very revealing is that in a lot of situations, it's not actually possible for companies to follow all Chinese laws at the same time. So they're inevitably violating some laws. So as a result, there's always the potential of a crackdown somewhere. And as we're seeing increasingly vague laws, so we just have this espionage law that came out on July 1st that apply to companies in addition to data security and oversight regulations. This increases the difficulty for companies to operate and to be able to operate legally. And I don't know what that looks like for the future and what types of decisions companies have to make in order to maintain their presence in the Chinese market. So I would say that this is an area where enhanced reporting requirements, particularly for Chinese investments, become really important so that at a very minimum, those decisions are more visible.
Professor Kugas, I think those are exceptional recommendations. The areas where I think this commission can be very effective too is holding the transparency. Look, this has got to be a team fight. We have the opportunity to stand for American principles with the U.S. government, with the American people. We also need our business and innovation sector to be on the same page because we are essentially allowing winners and losers to operate in this space, that those who decide to do the bid and will of the Chinese Communist Party get to have some sanctuary and therefore a market share, while those who hold to the same principles that they would operate in the United States are deprived of that. As a result, we're enfranchising the bad behavior of a few corporations who exploit humans, who torture individuals, who sacrifice American principles so that they can get a market advantage over those who are doing the right thing. I think transparency is a huge part of what this is. I thank the chairman for bringing this forward in a bipartisan way. I hope those companies have